The only righteous one in Jerusalem is Yahweh. He can do no wrong. Another thing that God can't do, he can do no wrong. I am so thankful for the things that God can't do. And I say that somewhat flippantly because yes, I know. All things are possible for God. There's nothing that God cannot perform and perfect and do. But we have to remember that God has a certain nature and God cannot lie. He cannot change. He is infinite. He is eternal. He is omniscient. He is omnipotent. God can't get any stronger. Because if he could get any stronger, that means that he wasn't as strong yesterday and he wasn't all-powerful. Right? I am very, very, very thankful for the things that God cannot do. And the more you think about that, so will you be. I am very thankful that God can do no wrong. Though the unrighteous are shameless, Yahweh brings his justice to fight each and every morning. To light each, my computer's all cracked. Sorry about that. I can't really see the words very well. Yahweh brings his justice to light each and every morning without fail. Let's take a look at the other side. Let's take a look at humans now. Who here has ever learned anything new? What does that mean? It means that we're finite. It means that we're temporal. It means that we are incomplete. We're the opposite of God. And yet he loves us so much. We're the sixth. He's the seventh.
Short on time.
Woe to those who devise iniquity. Devise. What does that mean? It means they're coming up with it. It means they're thinking of it. Do they have the power to do that? Of course they do. Who gave them a mind and a free will? God did. He made us good. But then we started thinking of all kinds of evil things to do. Woe to those who devise iniquity and plot evil schemes while lying in bed, so that they can implement them in the morning simply because they have the power to do so. Can you think of a more graphic verse on free will? Can you find in the Bible a more implicit example of our free will and the dangers thereof whenever you have a sinful nature? They lie in bed at night dreaming of evil things to do. They wake up in the morning and they put them into practice. Why? Because they have the power to do so. You want to know why there's time and chance in this world? Because there are 7.5 billion people exercising this kind of free will. And you wonder why things go haywire? Now, who in his sovereignty allowed this to happen? Yahweh. Why? He gave this planet to us under our dominion. First, we get to see the wrong way. Then he'll come and show us the right way. This world, he knew. What's the old expression? Give them enough rope and they'll hang themselves. Give them enough rope and they'll hang themselves. He said, I'm going to give them enough rope, they're going to hang themselves, and I'm going to be the only one who can cut them down and save them. That's Yahshua. Woe to the rebellious children who take counsel, but not from me, who seek protection, but not by my Spirit. They pile sin upon sin. Again, free will. Check this out in Jeremiah. Something I never commanded, nor would I ever command such a thing. Talking about idol worship, burning their children to false gods, Moloch. You know, whenever the false god that has his hands like this and a big hole in his belly where they put a fire and they burn their babies. It was the original form of abortion. Sacrificing babies to Moloch. And Yahweh says, this is something I never commanded, nor would I ever command such a thing. Did he know they were going to do it? He knows all things. But whose test is this? Ours. Who gets to live their life making choices? We do. And there are consequences. Check out this one in Jeremiah 7:31. Which I never, nor would I have ever commanded them to do. Then who chose to do it? They did. I would never command any sin, much less this gross abomination. Yahweh would never command any sin, much less this gross abomination, what they were doing. So here's the question. I think we've put the nail in the coffin of free will. Humans are doing things that Yahweh does not want them to do. Can we agree on that? Is that plainly clear? Is that very obvious that human beings do things outside of God's will? Yes or no?
Yes.
Who's to blame? We are. Who chooses to do these things? We do. What gives birth to time and chance? 7.5 billion people exercising this kind of free will. You were at the wrong place at the wrong time on the interstate. Can God protect? Better believe it. Does God send his mighty angels? Why do you think it's necessary? Why do you think it's necessary for God to send guardian angels if he were the one programming everything? If there wasn't room in this creation for time and chance, and if there weren't 7.5 billion people exercising this kind of free will, why would we need guardian angels? Think about that. God protects us from ourselves, and God protects us from others. Now, does he allow things to happen? We all have to leave this earth somehow, you guys. And this testing ground is for testing. That includes suffering. That includes suffering. Do you realize that it's suffering that brings most people to Yahweh? Did you know that? Do you realize that it's fear that brings a lot of people to Yahweh? God has all kinds of ways to draw his people to himself. Unfortunately, with Israel, the good things never drew them to him. What was the history of Israel? Whenever Yahweh blessed them above all other nations, whenever they were living high on the hog, they had their king, they had their land, they had their temple, they had everything. What did they do? They fell away. But then whenever Yahweh started to discipline them and punish them and take away their king, or take away their temple, or take away their country, or take away their freedom, or take away their agriculture, what did they do? They came back to Yahweh. Do we have to follow in the same footsteps as Israel? And that is probably the beauty of this lesson. You get to choose. That's both terrifying and beautiful. Because we get to learn from those who came before us. Israel always needed the smackdown to come back to Yahweh. Do we need the smackdown to come back to Yahweh? Or do we want to hear, understand, and say, let me stay on that good path now and for all and forever. I don't need the hammer to come down on me. Whenever I feel Yahweh tapping me on the shoulder, hey, let me straighten up then. Whenever I hear the still small voice, let me straighten up then. I don't want the hammer to fall. Israel always waited for the hammer to fall. Maybe that's the wonderful lesson here for tonight. Do we need the hammer to fall, or can we listen when the tap on the shoulder comes? Can we stay in his word as biblicists and try to never even need the tap on the shoulder? Can we walk the straight and narrow? Can we let his word guide us in our lives so that we don't need the tap on the shoulder, the whisper in the air, or the hammer falling upon us? I don't like it. I don't like the smackdown happening to me. How sad is this verse, Ecclesiastes 7:29? This is all I find. God made mankind right, but they sought out their own deviant path. Does that not sum it up? And by the way, if this deviates a little bit from the old King James, look up each word in the concordance. This is word for word, what the Hebrew says. Word for word. Word for word. This is all I find. God made mankind right, but they sought out their own deviant path. Does that not describe exactly what happened? I should say so. Point number 2. This life is our test. Who here thought that this life was Yahweh's test? Does Yahweh need to be tested? Does Yahweh need to learn to mind his P's and Q's? Does Yahweh need to have the tap on his shoulder? Have someone whisper in his ear? I think not. This life is our test, and we will be held accountable. Blessed is the man who endures testing and temptation. Because when he passes the test, notice that. Notice how clear. Because when he passes the test, he will receive the crown of life. There's inheritance for doing the right thing, for choosing to do the right thing, which Yahweh has promised to those who love him. But let no one say, oh, well, this horrible thing happened because, or, oh, well, yes, I know that I cheated on my wife 12 times this year, and I'll probably do it 15 more times in the year to come. But you know what? The fact that I'm doing it is probably proof that it's God's will. That's blasphemy. That is gross blasphemy. Can you imagine someone like a Jeffrey Dahmer? As a matter of fact, oh good grief, I've told you about my wife Veronica. She loves she's so intrigued and terrified by serial killers because in Mexico, they don't hear about them. In Mexico, you don't hear about serial killers. Never, ever, ever, ever. It's like they keep it a secret. She comes to the United States and all of a sudden she starts hearing news reports about a possible serial killer, about this, that, and the other, and she starts hearing about these names like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer and the BTK and Son of Sam and Manson and all these things. And she goes, what is wrong in this country? And I said, Veronica, they have it in your country too, they just don't report it. Here, everything gets reported. So it's all open spectacle. And she's like, how can this be? What is a serial killer? And I said, there's someone, they keep killing people. And usually it's based on a fetish or they have some MO that pattern that they keep killing under. She said, oh my God, no, where have I come? And I said, Veronica, it's the same thing in Mexico. You just come from a tiny little colony where everyone knows everyone's name and where you never leave. You walk on the same dirt paths and you eat from the same cornfield and bean field. You eat from the same plant of chili peppers your whole life and you don't hear about stuff. And I said, welcome to the world. I said, poor little thing. Gave her a hug and a little kiss on her forehead and said, here, have some ice cream. Make you feel better. Then she was happy. Well, tonight on Netflix or on she has all these things. I don't even get all that, but she has some kind of thing called, I think it's Netflix, and a brand new Ted Bundy movie's coming up tonight. So I said, hey, so I'll see you tonight. And she goes, oh, good, because I don't want to watch the Ted Bundy movie alone. I'm like, another one? And she goes, a brand new one. And I said, I'll tell you what, on the way home, I'll stop by and get us a salad and some wings. How about that? She said, oh, good. The point of all that is, can Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy blame God? No. They're sick. They're abominable monsters. They choose to do these things. They all have the same upbringing. Read about all their upbringings. All their upbringings are the same. So the whole nature and nurture, yes. I mean, we're very intricate beings. Does your very nature affect things? Yes, but you must dominate it. Look at Cain. What did Yahweh say? If you do what's right, but if you do what's wrong, you must dominate it. The same advice that he gave to Cain, he was a killer. Same advice goes to Jeffrey Dahmer. Same advice goes to Ted Bundy. You must dominate it. I'm not going to give you any slack just because you said you couldn't help it. Of course you can help it. You can choose not to. It's because the temptation was there and they liked it. That's why. Because they were evil, evil people. There is evil, and those people are evil. That's all there is to it. Look at Osama bin Laden. Look at Saddam Hussein. Evil people. Let no one who is being tempted say, God is tempting me. Let no one say that. For God is neither tempted by evil, not successfully. I know somebody could say, well, Jesus was tempted in the desert. What we're saying here is, yeah, anyone can attempt to tempt somebody, but we're talking about a successful tempting. No one can successfully tempt Yahweh. He's never going to give in. For God is neither tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. Each man is tempted when he is enticed and seduced by his own evil desires. I don't know how it can get any clearer. How clear is that? It's their own evil desires from within that are enticing them and seducing them. And whenever they give in, here's what it says. Then, once the evil desires conceive, think of that almost like a baby being born. There's elements, they're thinking about it, and all of a sudden there's something growing. Once the evil desires conceive, sin is born. And once sin fully matures, death is born. Do not be deceived, my beloved brothers. I mean, talk about a lesson right there. Talk about a lesson. We are kept by the power of God through faith for salvation. Who guarantees our salvation if we put our faith in Jesus Christ? Yahweh. He keeps us, which is ready to be revealed in the end time. You rejoice exuberantly in this, though it may be necessary for a short time for you to be grieved by various trials. God doesn't tempt us into sin, but does God test us? Oh, better believe it. From the Garden of Eden, who set up the two trees and made the rules? Yahweh. Who said to Moses, I'm going to take you in the desert so that I can test you? He just came out and told him. Who is it that tests us? He doesn't tempt us to sin, but he tests us. Will we trust him? Will we follow his way? Notice that it says, which is far more precious than corruptible gold, which is refined by fire. How do you purify and refine fire? How do you purify and refine gold? Fire. What is the fire that refines and purifies our faith? Trials. Trials. So whenever you're being tried, count it all joy. Count it all joy. And say, this is a test. I have the option, the opportunity to pass this test. I want to earn a crown. I want to earn fruit in heaven. I want to earn rewards. Oh, wow, this is a test. I can do this, that, or that. I have to make a choice. If I choose this, because it'll satisfy my ego and I can actually earn some dishonest money, but if I do the right thing, I might not get the money and I might not get the fame, but man, will I be setting a good example for my brothers and sisters, and man, will I be giving God glory. And there's also not a chance of me getting in trouble. You know what? Let's do that one. We all go through this, you guys. Whether you recognize it or not, we all go through this. You rejoice exuberantly in this, though it may be necessary for a short time for you to be grieved by various trials, so that your faith, then past the parentheses, might be declared worthy of praise, honor, and glory at the appearing of Yahshua Messiah. What do you get when you pass the test? Praise, honor, and glory at the appearing of Yahshua Messiah. Who here wants Yahshua to come and lavish upon you praise, honor, and glory. Yes, yes. If that's what he's offering, if that's what he's giving, if that's his will, yes, yes, yes. Don't forget, we must all appear before the judgment seat of the Messiah, so that each one may receive for the things he did while in the body, whether good or bad. While during this life on earth, while we're in the body, we are responsible. And we'll be held accountable at the judgment seat, not for salvation. That's through faith, that's through God's grace, but for rewards. Third and final point. But God is merciful and blesses us despite ourselves. Isn't that the whole point of everything? Doesn't it have to be like that? Do you want the greatest proof of God's mercy? First of all, what's mercy? Grace is unmerited favor. It's favor that you don't deserve. Grace is getting the good things that you don't deserve. Mercy is the opposite. It's not getting the bad things that you do deserve. That's mercy. I'm getting heaven by God's grace. I don't deserve it. I'm not getting hell by God's mercy because I do deserve it. There's an old expression, I have no idea who coined it, and I don't know how old, probably, knowing me, probably like 100 years old. I'm always into these old guys. But the Christian should never request justice from God. We don't want what we deserve. We want what we don't deserve. And I say that flippantly because justice is righteousness. And righteousness is only through faith in Jesus Christ. But it's a funny little saying that the Christian understands well enough not to ask for justice because we don't want what we deserve. We want God's favor. We want God's grace. We want what we don't deserve. And that's what we get in Jesus Christ. God is merciful and blesses us despite ourselves. You guys, we wouldn't be here. Remember I told you I was going to give you the biggest proof? The biggest proof of God's mercy is that we're still here. The fact that I'm standing here, the fact that you're sitting there, the fact that we're here, in other words, alive, in other words, still in this life and not burning in hell, that is the greatest proof of God's mercy.
Amen.
Because Yahweh could have said, to hell with all of you. And I don't say that in a vulgar sense. I say that literally. Literally. I mean those words. God could have said, to hell with all of you. And guess where we would have gone? To hell. He could have said, I'm going to make a new creation, and they're not going to treat me the way you guys do. I'll show you who's boss. I'll show you who's all powerful. The fact that we are not burning in hell right now is the greatest proof of God's mercy. Those who hide their sins will not prosper. Because that is mocking God. That is trying to mock God. And that's deceiving yourself. Those who hide their sins will not prosper. And I know what some people say, oh, what about lawyers that are billionaires? You guys, that's a slippery slope. Read Psalm chapter 73. That's a slippery slope that God uses to prevent them from coming to faith. Don't look at this world as the end of all things. Look at the next world as the end of all things. What are they going to look like in the next world? I bet you won't be envious of them then. If you're envious of their filthy money now, you won't be envious of them in the next life. Trust me on that. Those who hide their sins will not prosper, but whoever confesses and turns from their sin will receive mercy. What does God want? Confession or for us to hide our sins? Which does God want? Which does God want? For us to continue in our sins or to turn from the sins? Which does God want? I mean, a kindergartner could answer those questions. Hey, little boy, little girl, is it better to hide your sin or to confess it? To confess it. Does God want us to continue in our sin or does he want us to turn from our sin? He wants us to turn from our sins. I mean, these are simple questions. I mean, basic stuff. Basic stuff. And we know, who's Paul talking to? The church. And we know, that's confidential. Only the church can know this. The unbelievers can read it and they can understand the words, but they don't know it. They cannot experientially know this. And we know, it's confidential, that all things, it's complete. It's all things. Work together for good, it's constructive. To those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. It's conditional. It's confidential. We know, because we're the Christians, that all things, it's complete. Work together for good, it's constructive. But it's also conditional. To those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. All right. Believe it or not, we're done. We haven't even gotten to Ecclesiastes, have we? But this part's simple. This part is just fun. Okay, we've done the heavy lifting already. We've done the heavy lifting, now it's time for some cardio. How about that?
What?
No. Chris is a powerlifter. He's like,
What?
Do not say that awful word. Let's lift heavy, but I don't want any of that cardio. That is a 4-letter word.
Yeah.
I realized something else under the sun. In other words, life on earth. Life on earth. Remember what we're talking about. This is Ecclesiastes. I realized something else about this life on earth. The fastest runner doesn't always win the race. Haven't you seen whenever somebody gets tripped up, even though they're the fastest runner, they get tripped up? They're the fastest runner, but they had the flu that week. And they're still trying to compete, but they're not going to win. They are the fastest runner, but somebody got in front of them, something distracted them, their girlfriend broke up with them that day, and they're so distracted, they're not in the zone, and they're only running at 75% capacity, even though they are the fastest runner there. Guess what? They're not going to win. There are so many things that can cause failure in a human being. The strongest warrior doesn't always win the battle. Look at Goliath. Little tiny Andy and medium Robbie, welcome, brothers. The strongest warrior doesn't always win the battle. Look at Goliath. Wasn't Goliath 9 feet 9 inches tall? Wasn't he probably, being that tall, wasn't he probably 700 pounds? Didn't he have equipment that nobody could even really carry? And yet, one little tiny guy, a shepherd, defeated Goliath. The strongest warrior doesn't always win the battle. How many times have we seen, this is for the younger guys in the room, how many times have we seen Brock Lesnar beaten in MMA? He's the biggest and strongest and probably the most talented warrior on earth. But he gets beaten sometimes, doesn't he? He sure does. He sure does. As a matter of fact, he's been made to look silly once. Once. Been beaten a few times. He was made to look silly just once, even though he is the number one warrior. It's just that every dog has his day. What happens if the biggest dude gets punched in the throat? The fight's over. The fight's over. If the little tiny stick guy, who can move like lightning, if he punches the giant in the throat, the fight's over. And there are other places where a fight can end very quickly as well, right? The strongest warrior doesn't always win the battle. The wisest man isn't always the most satisfied. He's wise. He knows how to use his intelligence. He should be the most satisfied man on earth. He's not. The smartest man isn't always the richest. How many extremely intelligent people do you know that are not rich? How many really average IQ people are multimillionaires because all they really could do with their talent was make a cardboard box, but they started selling it and people started wanting more, so we made some more cardboard boxes. Well, next thing you know, I had a partner and he got me a factory and we started making a bunch of cardboard boxes, and well, next thing you know, millions of dollars started coming in. Just one less thing to worry about. Making cardboard boxes. Whatever. Doesn't know what 3 plus 3 is, but he knows what 10 million boxes sell for. Nor is the most skilled man always the most appreciated. How many incredibly skilled people do I know that have jobs behind the scenes that no one even knows about, and they're not appreciated? Check out this final verse, this final sentence of the verse. But time and chance affect them all. But time and chance affect them all. Fastest runner can't always depend on his speed. Strongest warrior cannot always depend on his strength. The wisest man cannot always depend on his wisdom for satisfaction. The smartest man is not necessarily going to be rich. The most skilled man will not always be appreciated. Why? Check it out. There was a young lady who was so smart. She went to college, she got her doctorate degree. Top of her class, straight A's. She was so applied. She lived the computing world. She saw the right job for her open up. She applied for it. No one else that had a doctorate degree applied. No one else that had the experience and had created more and showed more success even applied for the job. She didn't get the job. You know who got it? The company's girlfriend. The administrator's girlfriend. Sometimes it does not matter who you are, it matters who you know. Time and chance affect them all. And no one knows when his time will come. Like a fish caught in a cruel net. Did that fish know that his end had come? No. And a bird caught in a snare. Did that bird want to get caught in that snare? No. In the same way, people are snared in a cruel time when they least expect it. Consider the works of God. Who can straighten what he has made crooked? If God has made it crooked, are you going to make it straight? No. If God has made it straight, are you going to make it crooked? No. If God has closed the door,